first of all, the fact that before the first round and now before the second round of the presidentials, we are guessing what is going to happen is a huge sign of success for Ukrainian democracy. I mean, in countries like Belarus or Russia, neighbors of Ukraine, if I may remind you, there is no such speculation or guess game before elections. Done, or the Revolution of Dignity, as it was called, 5 years ago, almost exactly 5 years ago, was not about communism or capitalism. It was even, I would even say, it was not about East and West as geographical directions. It was about the desire of normal Ukrainians to live in a normal, modern European country, which is totally legitimate, and to be able to choose their own political system and to choose their government, free of interference from any neighboring nation, and you know which one I mean. So what they got in return was a war of aggression and the annexation of their territory. This is for background, this is to keep in mind. In front of that, you can then interpret the results of what happened yesterday and what is going to happen in the next couple of days. Third thing to keep in mind, the reforms enacted in the last 5 years are by far the most ambitious in Ukraine ever since the early 90s, since the country became independent. And they are, well, as they say, the glass is half full. I would say it's half full rather than half empty, and certainly not totally empty. Because there are a couple of things that went really well, unexpectedly well, based on what we expected in 2014, feared. And that's, for example, the stabilization of the economy. It's true it hasn't been growing much the first couple of years, but it's just economic growth is slightly picking up now. Even more importantly, and a more spectacular success than that, is the stabilization of the currency. The hryvnia was in free fall for only a couple of months, and it was immediately stabilized through smart fiscal and economic policies. Reform of public administration, very important progress in education and health sector. These are things that the current government can absolutely put down as a success. What hasn't worked well is, of course, fighting corruption. The power of the oligarchs is still there, and the independence of the justice sector has come under attack. It has been undermined. So all this is true, but let's not forget about the success of reforms. Fourth point, the human rights situation may be wanting, but if we compare it to other countries in the region, I think it is incomparably better. And we will hear the contrary in a minute maybe, but let me put that to the record here too. That's what I believe in, based on talks to many of my not only Ukrainian friends, but also international observers. Fifth point, Zelensky, obviously, I would draw the parallel to Donald Trump in a way. There was also silent in Brussels. Different hairstyle, admittedly, different age group, different generation, but definitely a TV star. And the blend of fictitious and real in these personalities and the worlds they live in may actually be another parallel. Let me just point out 3 points where I say Zelensky stands out and that have contributed to his victory in the first round. We'll see who wins in the second round, and that's the anti-corruption drive. So his clear #1 topic was to rail against corruption and to promise that he will do everything different. This in combination with the second factor, which is lack of experience. You know, we tend, especially if us inhabitants of the Brussels bubble, we tend to think that lack of political experience is a minus, is some kind of disadvantage. No, it is not. We've seen this in other cases too, not only in Central Europe recently. So the fact that he's completely untouched by political experience becomes an asset. And third, he is known through TV, and not the TV news, but TV entertainment. and this is extremely important. Entertainment in politics has played an increasing role and will play an even more important role in the future. And finally,
would you say that in terms of lack of experience, there are some parallels there with what happened last weekend in neighboring Slovakia and the election of Zuzana Šabatová?
Yeah, in this one factor, yes, but I think she does have she comes from civil society, contrary to Mr. Zelensky. She has been in public affairs and in seriously political stuff for some time. She hasn't done any TV comedy. Not that this is necessarily a reason to discriminate, but I mean there are a couple of differences between the two, which merit consideration. My last point is very brief. Watch the Rada elections in October, the parliamentary elections in Ukraine. The presidents in Ukraine are very powerful figures. It's a presidential democracy. The presidents appoint the government, but in order to get anything done in Ukrainian politics, you do need parliamentary majorities. And even though the current Rada is already fractured, we may see even more of a fracturing in October. There's no date set yet for these elections, but they will happen in October. And the result of those elections might even have a stronger influence on Ukrainian politics than the current two rounds of presidential elections. So I'm afraid in order to answer the question where Ukraine precisely is heading, we'll have to wait till October.
Вибір, який робить Україна, це є проєвропейський вибір, і європейські стандарти вони повинні бути залишені, і для майбутнього президента це є пріоритетом щодо захисту прав людини в Україні.
Regardless of the choice Ukraine will make in 3 weeks, we should hope, and we are hoping that Ukraine will keep up to its pro-European intentions, and that the European standards, especially with regard to the human rights and their protection, will be kept and will remain the priority for our country.
Незважаючи на все, Україна має проєвропейський напрямок, і цей напрямок залишається в подальшому, і це підтвердили зараз результати виборів першого туру, які відбулися.
And despite all our doubts, Ukrainians are still keeping up to their pro-European choice.
І тому те, що буде відбуватися в Україні, це лише тільки підвищення стандартів та тих новацій і реформ, які вже відбулися і відбуваються. І сподіваюся, що завдяки Європейському Союзу та нашим іншим партнерам за кордоном буде відбуватися і подальшому для ствердження свободи слова, демократії в Україні.
And I do hope that the future of Ukraine will be only connected with the improvement of the standards, with severing them even, and that the freedom of speech and the human rights protection will be finally gained.
Дійсно, не все так добре, як я зараз розповідаю, бо є і певні негативні риси, зокрема, якщо взяти останні моніторингові місії щодо ООН і щодо Державного департаменту Сполучених Штатів Америки, є певні проблеми і свободи слова, і захисту прав не лише журналістів і адвокатів, про що я казав, але сподіваюся, що в подальшому вони будуть усунуті і ми зможемо чітко зазначити, що навіть ті політичні особи, які отримали статус політичних біженців в країнах Європи, зможуть повернутися додому в Україну.
In fact, not everything is so ideal. I'm not idealizing the situation. We have quite some drawbacks and quite some housework to be done. It was mentioned by the European partners. It was mentioned by some of the reports of the United Nations. But I hope that those people who are now seeking the political refuge in the European Union, they will sooner or later come back to Ukraine.
Тому ми бачимо, що зараз, як зазначив наш модератор нашої зустрічі, про те, що є українці, які і зараз перебувають за кордоном, однак вони свої голоси видавали, знов таки за проєвропейський вибір. Це є, на мою думку, позитивним напрямком щодо руху нашої країни в майбутнє.
As the moderator of our meeting has already mentioned, there are a lot of Ukrainians living abroad, and they were also voting for the pro-European direction of the development of Ukraine.
Zelensky got his popularity because he was a TV comedian and everybody could would see him almost every day on television. He was also he presented himself as an anti-system candidate, which seems to be very popular now around the world. And in that way he could gather populist votes. But I'm just a non-Ukrainian person, so if I were a Ukrainian, I would certainly have serious concerns about the future of my country, because I don't know what is his political program, and he should clarify that as soon as possible, and of course before the second round. Thank you.